You're listening to an extract of the Leader podcast. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Now, the London mayoral race has just kicked off, and Sadiq Khan's campaign launch at Bounds Green and Haringey didn't quite go as expected.
Sadiq, will you talk to us a minute? This is very socially regressive and it's killing people with the air pollution. Sadiq, why won't you talk to us?
Evening Standard City Hall editor Ross Lydall was there. Ross, what happened?
So this was earlier this morning outside a rather trendy cafe in Bounds Green, quite near the tube station, when word got round that Sadiq had turned up to use this cafe, which had previously received some funding from City Hall to keep going during the pandemic, to launch his mayoral election, a re-election campaign. The event started around 10 o'clock this morning with the formal media launch. People began to tweet his appearance, and then maybe about 10:30, the first of these protesters rolled up on a bike to be joined by a few other perfectly reasonable people who lived nearby and were concerned about what's known as an LTN, or low traffic neighbourhood. And basically they showed no sign of budging, despite being told after a while that Sadiq had actually left via the back door. They weren't having it. They didn't believe it because you could see his police Range Rover parked further down the road. So in the end, Sadiq was actually told to stay inside the cafe by his police officers for his own safety in case things turned a bit nasty, although there was no obvious sign that might happen. And after about Sadiq being in for an hour or so, holed in this cafe at the back of it, he decided he simply got to get back to City Hall, headed off briskly down the road to his car to be pursued by some of these protesters who basically just wanted the chance to make their point and talk to him rather than actually to confront him in any sort of violent way.
Sadiq, can you talk to us? You're on there. We want to be listened to, Sadiq.
So they didn't get to speak to him, but you did, Ross. And you went in there straight in there because, of course, this is an election that's been delayed by a year. There was, last year, quite a big gulf between Sadiq Khan and the Conservatives. It did seem like it was going to be pretty boring. You go straight in there and ask him, is this going to be a boring election? the most boring election ever, I think it was, you said, Ross.
This is the concern, that basically not only is it highly unusual in that we're having it as we come out of the pandemic and out of the lockdown, which will certainly at the start restrict canvassing and campaigning, but also the question is, are people really that bothered about who's Mayor of London, and is it going to make much difference to their lives as we move forward? And Sadiq said he was concerned that turnout could be low, so he's very keen that people apply for a postal vote.
People, not unreasonably, have got concerns in relation to the virus. We're keen to make sure that we don't do anything that inadvertently risks people's safety, whether it's our campaigners or Londoners. That's why I'm encouraging Londoners to make sure they're registered to vote, and then to register for a postal vote so they can vote safely from home.
In general, the issue will be that whether there'll be enough noise and interest around the mayoral election with so much else going on, and people are probably more concerned about, will their jobs be saved? When can they get out of their houses? When can they, get their kids back to school? When can they go and exercise and meet their friends? And probably most of all, when can they go back to the pub and have one almighty good drink?
So it's all down to the campaigns to try and reinvigorate things, and Sadiq Khan appears to be going down the line of jobs.
It's really important that the mantra for a second term, if I'm re-elected, is jobs, jobs and jobs, because I've seen over the last year our city experiencing more than 300,000 job losses linked with the pandemic. I'm quite clear we in City Hall need to be protecting the jobs that we have in our city. We need to be supporting job creation, and we need to be helping those Londoners who lose their jobs get back into work as soon as possible.
Is that going to be the vote winner for him?
Well, this is a bit of a strange one to go on. Last year when it started, he was talking more about housing and affordable housing, which he's got more control over. He hasn't actually got that many jobs to look after, if you like. Well, he has in terms of the Met Police Transport for London, but the Greater London Authority isn't a massive direct employer, and therefore he can't necessarily generate many more jobs. What he's going to look to do is to try and create this illusion that by voting for Sadiq can help you save your job. He can certainly lobby the government for schemes such as a furlough scheme to remain in place as long as needed, to essentially prevent people being made unemployed. And he can also try to increase, training schemes and so on if people do lose their jobs. But this is really job creation is really at the margins of what City Hall does. So it's slightly an odd tack to take.
Let's talk about the election itself. Has that been altered by the lockdown, by this pandemic? We know it's obviously been delayed by a year, but will the actual process of it be any different? Will people be voting any differently this time around?
In general, no, although there are a couple of tweaks. So basically that polling day will happen as normal on May the 6th, and you can go to the polling station. Polling stations will be made as COVID secure as possible. So we already know that people are being asked to bring their own pencil to mark their ballot rather than sharing pencils that might be left around, the old classic stubby pencil. However, what all the candidates are doing is encouraging people to get a postal vote, so they've got no need to actually go to the polling station on the day. And as we mentioned, you can actually get a postal vote over the next month or so by letting your local council know that you want one. The other couple of things are that you can actually apply for a proxy vote, so somebody can vote in your place. And also the other big change is that the result of the election won't be known until probably Saturday evening. We go to the polls on the Thursday, the 6th. Normally we know the next day, the Friday evening, who's won. But the count will be much slower this time, and we won't find out for about 48 hours at least who's won.